Welcome to Local Edition. I'm Bella Shaw. The month of February brought some record and significant rainfall to the state, so a lot of people think that bodes well for the drought situation here in California. Oxnard Councilman Bryan MacDonald is here to join us, and he says, not so fast. Don't be thinking the drought's over, right?
No, unfortunately not. And as you say, we've had record rainfall, but when you look at the way the water systems work throughout California, you recognize that the majority, since we're so close to the ocean, the majority of the water that we're seeing falling from the sky is going out into the ocean. It's not going back into our water system, which is where we really need it to go. And there's a droughtwatch.org on the internet. You can look up a map there, and it will show that the Oxnard Plains and Ventura County are still in a red state, which means critical in terms of the drought. About half the state is now out of the drought. The other half is in a yellow state, which is a cautious state.
Wow.
And Oxnard and Ventura County are in the red state still. We're the only part of all of California that's still in that condition.
And the irony is you're sitting on the ocean, and
We're
can't
sitting on the
tap
ocean.
into that.
We've got thousands of gallons falling out of the sky, and we can't capture it fast enough to get it back into our drinking system.
So is that our next step, what we need to look at, ways to capture this water? I mean, how many people have a big 5-gallon tub on their porch or whatever, and they're capturing water?
You know, it's becoming a fad now to do that, and I'd rather see it not be a fad, but be a practice for everyone. My wife keeps a 5-gallon bucket on our patio and captures water. Our former fire chief, Mike O'Malia, put in a system with 55-gallon barrels that he collects all the rainwater off the downspouts off his house. And the last I heard, he thought that he had enough water collected by now that he can probably water all of his exterior plants, lawns, and everything during the whole summer month without having to use drinking water. So there are ways to do it, very conscientious, effective, environmentally safe ways of doing it. Plus there's facilities out there. The United Water Conservation District has what we call a spreading ground out off of Vineyard and Los Angeles Avenue, and they collect water out of the Santa Clara River. Not so much that it harms the species that live in the river, but enough to allow us to repopulate or reinvigorate our drinking water system, there are 3 levels of aquifers. Our drinking water comes out of the 3rd level. So it takes a while for that water to get back into the system, get into the groundwater. And that's why when it rains overnight, we don't see the dramatic effect we'd like to see from it.
Yeah. What about the Mammoth snowpack? They've got record snow this year since
record
2000,
snow?
Yeah, in history, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's one of the largest snowpacks they've had, and I don't know how long.
Recorded history, I think. Yeah.
It's phenomenal. And that's where we get most of our drinking water, but we have the same problem with that is we're good at collecting water at a measured rate. But when it all comes at the same time, when the snowpack melts too fast or flows downstream too fast, we lose a lot of that water too. So it's a matter of how do we collect it, how do we increase the collection, and yet how do we make sure that we don't damage the species, the flora and the fauna that depend on that water for their livelihood.
But there is some good news with that.
Oh, there's great news with that.
With the Mammoth snowpack.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. We're in much better shape than we have been in probably 5 or 10 years. It's just a matter of making sure we're on our A game and able to collect it in the right way.
You see a lot of water on the streets and freeways. It's just not draining, it's flooding. I mean, cars are hydroplaning. What's going on with that?
We're at sea level, and the only place for the water to go is into the ocean. But when you're at sea level, you don't have the gravity that you have from the higher elevations to draw that water down. And when we're talking about water conservation, I can't tell you the number of people that I drive around on rainy days, and there's still water in their lawn with their sprinklers. They don't turn their sprinklers off. Everybody should have a system where they can disable their sprinklers during the rain events and do that. A lot of people don't think of that. And unfortunately, the city's done that a couple times. We've gone around and told our workers, hey, you need to shut these systems down. Let nature do it for a while. But yeah, when you're at sea level, and we have this problem with Mandalay Beach Road, if it's a real high tide, the roads tend to flood, and people call and say, well, can you come pump the water out? And we said, where do you want us to pump it to? And they said, well, pump it in the ocean. We said, well, that's where it's coming from.
Okay.
And so it's just a never-ending cycle of trying to get the water out, and that's the hazards of living on a beach community or in a beach community is we don't drain as well as upper parts of Ventura or Santa Barbara does.
That explains it. And then you get a few wildfires in that area where the vegetation is gone. Mm-hmm. Then you're really in big trouble.
Sure, and you have stuff sliding down the hills in terms of rocks, mud, and everything else.
Potholes in the
potholes.
street.
It's very
debris.
easy even for the street drains to get clogged with palm fronds or whatever fall out of the trees. Mm-hmm. And the next thing you know, it backs up and it's a huge mess. So It's almost a never-ending adventure.
And all that debris in the streets, you know, there's also in the surf, you know, you have to ask the surfers if they're going to be out there surfing in storms.
It's interesting. I talked to quite a few of my friends that surf. I'm not a surfer myself, but a lot of the more avid surfers will tell you that they won't surf during a rain event, even though the waves are excellent, as they call them, because of the amount of stuff that flows into the ocean, either from the stormwater collection system or the riverbeds or anything else that when the water flows, it drags all this stuff out into the ocean. They said sometimes it's very unhealthy to be in the ocean during a rain event.
So I think a lot of people assumed that plastic bags and those kind of things were in the ocean because people on boats were littering.
I think that would probably be the assumption, but I think that's about the farthest from the truth. It's when you drop something in a city. In fact, Oxnard, if you look anywhere where they're doing construction in Oxnard, you'll see a barrier around the street collection facility because they don't want construction debris and stuff going into the stormwater system that flows back into the ocean. That's why those things are there. And you may see them, 2 or 3 miles away from the ocean, but that system all ultimately terminates at the ocean. So it's a matter of if I drop something in my front yard, it blows down the street, it goes in the stormwater collection system, and ultimately ends up in the ocean.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of engineering to understand, and physics and everything to understand how the whole system works.
Yeah, it's a lot of it is just a gravity-operated system, and everything's designed to work off of gravity. But the unfortunate thing is that the gravity terminates at the ocean, and a lot of the stuff that we don't expect to see in the ocean shows up there. And I would venture to say that most people that are boaters are probably better stewards of the ocean than other people. Just not that we do it deliberately, we just don't think about it, of what we're throwing in the street is going to the ocean.
And we don't think about the shoreline washing away too, the beachy area, we don't think about that, and that has to be replenished. Sure,
Depending on which way your beach faces, and City of Port Hueneme has a huge problem with sand replenishment. They depend on the Ventura County Harbor District or the Port of Hueneme. When they dredge, that sand comes back to the Port of Hueneme. And there's a committee called Beacon, which is Beach Erosion and Control and Nourishment, that their whole mission between Santa Barbara and Ventura County is making sure that the sand levels are appropriate for different areas, and that communities that need sand can reach out to communities that have extra sand and broker deals to help replenish their beaches. So there's a lot of effort that goes into this type of stuff that people don't even consider.
Or how that might affect fish and wildlife, the birds that count on that shoreline, to feed or whatever. And if it's,
absolutely.
So we don't think about the long-term consequences.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Santa Barbara, and for years and years and years, I went to the beach, and I never gave any thought to, gee, where does the sand come from, or how do the animals
been there for millions of years.
Yeah, you just never think about it. But when you get into, especially on the governmental side of it, of how to help your beach survive, and talking to my friends in the city of Port Hueneme, it's a huge issue for them. And last year they got to the point where they were losing roadways because of the beach erosion, and they had to bring in rocks and everything else. Or you look at the McGrath campground, about 2 years ago, they depend on a levee breach every winter so that the water doesn't flood the campground, and for 1 year the breach didn't happen. And the whole campground flooded, was underwater, was unusable to all the people that like to go there.
The campers never even thought, gee, what happened? I wonder where that happened. Well, very interesting. We'd love to have you back sometime. Oxnard Councilman Bryan MacDonald joining us here today on Local Edition. And we thank you for joining us as well, and we'll see you next time. I'm Bella Shaw.